Hey, everybody, and welcome to Key Conversations for Leaders. I'm your host, John Ryan, and today we have a very special guest, Pollyanna Lenkic. Pollyanna is a coach, mentor, facilitator, and speaker. She's one of Australia's leading professionals in lifting professional performance in global and national organizations. She achieves this by developing high-performing teams, elevating employee engagement, and maturing the potential of all. Having built a multi-million-pound business from the ground up, Pollyanna knows the importance of rewards of high performance. She's also the author of Women in Success and is a regular contributor to Australia's best training business blog, which is smartcompany.com.au. She is considered their expert on teams for the site. Welcome to the show, Pollyanna.
Welcome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation, John.
You're welcome. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I wanted to start out. I know that obviously you're from Australia, but when you started out, you actually built your business in London. You went to London with not a lot of resources or network. Can you tell us a little bit about how you built your successful business from scratch, literally?
Thank you. Well, we it's always on the shoulders of community and giants, isn't it? We all build from support around us. However, I landed in London with £40 in my pocket. I think it was traveller's checks back then because it was the late 80s. And yeah, I didn't know anyone. I had no return ticket home. You could do that back then. You could turn up as long as you went through Dover and not Heathrow, they let you in. And then I just had so that was back in 86. And in 1990, I had the opportunity to partner in a business that was already set up, but my business partner at the time wasn't able to leave his full-time role to work on the business. I think that's a common thing that happens with entrepreneurs. You start your side hustle, and it had been a side hustle for him for a long time. So I took it on board full-time, not really intending. I wasn't really sure, to be honest. It was an industry I didn't know. It was specialist IT recruitment consultancy. It specialized in it had a niche in unit trust investment management business sector with IT. Knew nothing about that, knew nothing about recruitment. But what propelled me was a bet, actually. It was out one night and one of my business partner's friends sort of pretty much tapped me on the knee and went, "So you're going to be doing a bit of secretarial for the business?" And I took offense to that. I thought that was a little bit, sexist and made a bet and just said, "Hey, I'm going to double your salary by the end of the year," which was complete bravado. And I had no context for that. And I woke up the next day and went, "Oh, that was, got to do this now." And for context, I left a £14,000 a year job as an EA to two managing directors of a media company. And this person was earning £1,000 I think he was earning £800 a day. So if you do the numbers, that looked like a very out of reach. And I did. I achieved that goal in that first year. I was just, became very focused and driven. So yes, that was the sort of not so salubrious beginnings, but it was an incredible experience.
So in that situation, it was a challenge. It was a risk. What do you think was it inside that really drove you to commit to doing that and obviously achieving that result?
I think, look, I was 24, and I was in a place where I didn't have history. And I think there's power to that, John. When you go somewhere else and nobody knows you, you can actually reinvent yourself in a way that strips away the box that we put ourselves in, because we know that the box we put ourselves in is far more damaging than the box others put us in. But sometimes coming out of that box, there was no one there to say, "Hang on a minute, that's not you." And I came from a regional Victoria town here in Australia, which was about an hour and a half from our main city in Victoria, which is Melbourne, which is where I now live. And look, compared to cities in the US, Melbourne's a country town. Yeah, we say we're a city, but really we're just globally we're not a massive city. So coming from the country, it was even smaller, and there was often signposts to remind yourself of where you came from and who you were, and others to reinforce that, which is not always helpful. So I just fear of failure. I think I made that bet, and I took it. I just thought, I'm just not stumping up and going, "I didn't do this." And I remember I spent a long time clearing out the spare room. It was like in the UK, every house has what they call a box room, like a really small room. You wouldn't even get a single bed in there, but it's just like this really small room. And so that's where I put a desk and a phone, because we didn't have PCs or internet back then. We had landlines. You might have to Google that if you're younger than me, which you probably are if you're listening to this. So I had a phone and a notepad. And I remember just sitting down going, I've cleaned this office. I actually have to get to work now. But I didn't know what that next step was. So I just burst into tears. And I can't remember that point of like being this dribbling mess on my desk going, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this, to suddenly going, I'm doing this. And that bit's a little bit blurry in my memory, but I just remember being distraught, just going, oh my God. The first step I took was I contacted people in the industry and said, I'm doing this work. I've got to say, I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's a great opportunity. Can you tell me what are the things that you really value in the service you get from people who are doing this work? And what are the things that really bug you off? That you just sort of, recruitment consultants back then in the 80s, in the 90s, didn't have, as good a reputation as they have now. It wasn't yet a profession that was mainstream, if that makes sense. So I found out the good, the bad, and the ugly, and decided I'd focus on the good. And I think that was a massive turning point. And by seeking out for help, John, if someone comes to you and says, I need some help, you're not going to say, get lost, you freak, and put a restraining order on them. I'm hoping that you wouldn't do that. So
Right.
people were really generous and they were helpful. And if you think about all the great work that Brené Brown does, it's that vulnerability, that honesty piece. I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't. I was genuinely looking to find excellence in the work I was doing.
So I'm hearing inside of that, one, you were able to shed the confines, the box from the past. Like no one, you're in a new country, you're here. The role of who you can show up to be from a being perspective was unlimited.
Yeah.
And you had that vulnerability to recognize what you know and what you don't know and to ask for help in that space. So it sounds like being comfortable and taking that risk and being authentic and vulnerable, as you said, is a major part. Is that one of the things that comes up in your work with teams too?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's no, and if you think about leading teams, leading, being a leader to another individual person where you're mentoring them and supporting them. No leadership is isolated. It's not a single person game. It's, we all stand on the shoulders of others. We all, are embraced by our community. We all need others to do the work we do. So when I work with teams, I work from a systems thinking lens. So, the first part is you must know yourself, know thyself, be courageous enough to be vulnerable, and and not be messy about it. There's really messy, and then there's vulnerability. So how do you take that vulnerability and build step by step? You think about all that great work that James Clear talks about, those atomic habits, those micro steps a little bit each day. And I think that is a game changer. And I think without realizing, that's what I did. Because I had no context, I had no coaches, I had no mentors back then. So I found them. I didn't even know that there was this thing called a mentor that existed for the work that I was doing. So it's sort of, some of it happened organically, but it was just getting up every day, having a process, having a routine, finding out what I didn't know. I was never frightened to say, I don't know how this works. And that, I believe, was a pivotal strength, because when you do that bravado piece and I know it all and I'm doing this now, I don't think I would have got the same help that I got back then. And I worked my buns off, I worked really hard and loved it. The first time I helped somebody else get a job, it filled my heart. I can't tell you the joy that was, so it started to have real meaning for me. And that was definitely something that changed how I approached the work and the success that followed.
Well, I mean, you've identified, taking risks, one, moving to another country, taking on new roles, expressing even your own vulnerability as a risk as well. And how you do one thing is how you do many things, including
Right.
you're a bit of an adventurer. Like I know that you have done skydiving. Can you share us a little bit about your experience. I understand there's some things that happened when you were doing skydiving in Kenya, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. You've done your research. Yes, correct. I was very fortunate to skydive for over a 15-year period and jumped with some extraordinary people around the world. Did a lot of skydiving in Arizona as well, which was fabulous, onto the desert there. They lots of fun stuff to have, good adventures. But yes, well, it depends. I'm either very lucky or very clumsy, depending on on your lens here. But we were skydiving in just outside of Mombasa. And on one of the trips that I did a couple of trips there, we jumped from 18,000 feet. So 15,000 feet, you need oxygen, but we were in a fast plane. We were probably a little reckless, and we said, let's just go up a little bit higher. So, I'm sure we won't get hypoxia because, we're going up fast. So that was obviously a decision that wasn't a smart decision. We were doing an 8-way formation over Malindi Beach. It was sunset. Oh my God, best time to jump out of an aeroplane. The sky's all pink and blue, and it was beautiful. The problem was, as we jumped out, you either have what they call floaters or divers. I was a diver, and I sliced my head. There was like a little hook on the door. And I remember earlier on in the day going, you know what? We got to tape that up. Some Muppet's going to slice their head open on that door if they don't duck. And of course, that Muppet was me. So I came out and had raised up a little bit, smacked my head, sliced my head. And the next thing I knew, it was 5,000 feet. And that's tricky, so 18,000 feet to 5,000 feet. And when I came to, I remember an instructor in my early days when I was training, doing my skydiving ratings, he said, 3 seconds to save your life when it goes to hell. And so my first thought was, can you vomit in free fall? That's not a life-saving thought, because I was feeling really nauseous. I couldn't see very well because there was this gooey stuff, on my goggles. I was bleeding. My second thought was, I know there are sharks in the water, because we had a warning in our briefing. That's obviously 2 seconds gone, probably a little bit longer. My third one was, okay, here's what I'm going to do. But the tide was in, so we had a really narrow landing area, crosswind landing. And look, it all worked out well. I'm here, talking to you today. But I'll often say to people, John, what do you think saved my life that day? Because when we looked at the video, the formation built over here, and I'm falling completely stable over here. So nobody knew I was in trouble. So someone coming to get me is not what saved me that day. What do you think?
Training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Training. And you know what most people say when I ask that question? They'll say things like, you got lucky, someone helped you, you were confident, a whole manner of things. And I go, yep, none of that. Muscle memory from training. And exactly to your point earlier on, the steps that I took in my early business with naivety is a great thing when you're starting out, when you're 24, because you don't know what you don't know, and there's power to that. So those micro steps every single day built skills, capability, habits, really good productive habits. And in my skydiving, muscle memory, I was out for the count. And when you look at the video, the fact that I was falling completely stable, that's muscle memory, that's training. I don't know if you've ever jumped, but before every jump, and we used to do 8 to 10 a day on holidays. 8 was my happy place. We did 15 minutes of reserve drills, training, like physically, verbally, physically. We went through the whole motions. We practiced the dive. So 15 minutes times 8 jumps a day, or diving 10, that's a lot of muscle memory. Muscle memory saved my life. And it's that prepared spontaneity piece. What can we do so that when we have to stand up spontaneously and be ready, that we're prepared for? And I think, muscle memory saves your life and continues to save me on many ways. So it's a really important skill to develop, whether it's a physical skill or whether it's a verbal or a work skill, or if you're nervous about presenting, then that muscle memory, you just keep on doing it, regardless if you're nervous, which is why I throw big rocks at confidence. We don't need confidence to do this. We just need to practice. We need a process. We need to create good habits, all stuff. I know I'm talking to the converted here, all stuff that So looking at our beliefs and what we believe, and sort of flicking back to something that you said earlier on, John, is I didn't know what the ceiling or the cap was when I set up my business when I was 24, and started working on that full time on my own. And I remember going to my very first How to Be a Good Recruitment Consultant course, and I was so nervous. I remember I'd been doing this job for 2 years by that point, and everyone was at least 10 years older than me. And I used to always think that, I was working with all these old men. They were probably only 35, bless them. But, I was 24, 25. I think probably 26 by the time I went to this course. And I was so nervous because they were saying words like pipeline and funnel. And I'm going, oh my God, what's a pipeline? Do I need one of those? Because I just didn't have any of the terminology. I didn't have a clue. And I was talking to one chap and he's going, all right, darling, you know what you got to do, right? When you're successful like me, you're going to have this, you're going to have that, you're going to have that. And this light bulb went off and I went, oh my God, I'm triple billing this guy. And I'm so glad I didn't meet you 2 years ago, because I would have put a ceiling on what I thought was possible. And that just clicked something for me and went, it's really important who you take advice from. It's really important that advice doesn't create a lower ceiling for you, because that, if I had have listened to him 2 years ago, I would have got to his level and thought, oh, I made it. I've made it. Whereas I had no idea. That was a very pivotal moment. So I'd created the muscle memory in the work I was doing to exceed those, those limits. Does that make sense?
I think it does. And I'd like to clarify a little bit. So one, on the you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes it's good to not know what you can and cannot do, because you can surpass that. And also connecting it to the skydiving, the muscle memory. So when you were unconscious, when you were falling, you were stable. The stable diving, to make sure I understand the terminology, was your body was in a free fall that was sustainable, not flipping on
flat flying. Just because if I was buffeting, I wouldn't have. If I was buffeting, I would not have come out of that. Because if you think about spinning at terminal velocity, then coming to, I very much doubt I would have been able to get out of that.
Okay. So that literally unconsciously, because of your training, the muscle memory that was there, your body knew, I'm in this environment. This is how I behave when I'm in this environment, even though you were not conscious at the time. Phenomenal. Love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that gift. But it also goes to, and you've written extensively about confidence and the dangers of what you label the confidence quest. And I think, of course, many people out there are like, well, I just want to be confident, and I could just feel confident. What are we missing for those that are on that delusional quest, as you might say?
And look, I do think it's a little bit of self-deception, and it's a group self-deception. About in 2000, when I was arranging for the sale of my company, I started thinking about, I just have to give some context, how women see and perceive themselves through the lens of success. And confidence was a theme that just kept coming up. If only I had more confidence, if only I could always be confident, if only I could be confident when I needed to be confident. So this confident narrative was there. And I was just going, I don't know that we need confidence, because I didn't have any confidence probably for the first, 8 years of my business, I reckon. But I still just got up and did it anyway. What if we connected with our courage instead? And I know Brené Brown has also done some great work on, connecting with courage, be courageous. And we already have that courage within us. And, for anyone here who is listening to this and saying, but I like when I feel confident. Yeah, we all do. Awesome. Enjoy it. But it's a roller coaster. So therefore, if you're riding the high of confidence, just enjoy it. However, know that we're seeing what plays out in the world when overconfidence is played out as well. I just don't think it's, I think it's a false, we're worshipping at false gods here. Whereas if we look at our courage, then we can see what we're capable of. And if we know what we're capable of, then we're limiting ourselves, because we don't know what we're capable of. What we are capable of is doing hard things. I think the past 12 months has shown that. And, I did a Google search this morning, 51 seconds, 887 million responses are shown when you type in confidence in women. I'm sure it's probably different now. Um, and, all these titles are popping up: boost, drive, build confidence. Tell us about your confidence gaps and how to fill them. Let me help you be empowered and be confident. I just sort of go, it's like a little bit of a vitamin B deficiency, isn't it? Maybe we just need a inoculation so that women, can be cured of this terrible demise of lacking confidence. So all the research points to women are lacking confidence. And a lot of men who are supporting women to be successful in their lives and in the workplace are misguided and are coaching them on confidence. So stop, just stop. Coach on skills, capability, give stretch assignments, shadow, mentoring opportunities. Do practical things that creates that muscle memory so that when the time happens and you need it, it's there for you. We don't need a jab. So just remember, women are already powerful, we're already talented, we're already creative, we're already resourceful, and we're already whole, like every other human being on the planet, men and women. However, we seem to be coming towards women's development, and have done for decades, on a deficiency-based model. It's time to stop that. So women are not lacking, our systems are lacking.
I love that. I want to find out more about that as well as we continue this conversation. Let me clarify, make sure I understand where you're coming from. So from that confidence, you said there's nothing. So really, there's nothing wrong with having confidence, and there's a problem, of course, with having too much confidence, because that's when your competence does not match your actual ability, I suppose. But really, why wait until you're in that zone of competence before going for what you want and developing that muscle memory? Because just doing the work, getting the skills, practicing daily, developing muscle memory, get you that place of confidence. And if you don't make it right away, who cares? You're still getting the skills anyways, which is what you need to get the results.
Correct. One of I'm running a virtual online leadership program for a beautiful group of people, and one of the participants, Justine, has a thing in her team where they talk about failing forward, and I just love it. I'm like, Justine, I'm stealing that. I'm going to use that all the time. Building that muscle memory means we need to fail, but let's fail forwards rather than failing backwards. And I think it's a really beautiful phrase that she shared with the cohort in the team, because you're going to fail. That's the stretch goal. And there's a coach in the US called Rick Tamlin who has a program called The Big Game. I worked with Rick years ago. He's a fabulous chap. And he sort of talks about, when we want to play a bigger game in life, if we know how, it's not a bigger game. So it's really interesting how much we diminish what's possible, because confidence it's that thing that will never always be there. It's vapor. So we need something more solid to hold on to.
Is that our box that we put ourselves in, that I'm not confident, when we're making an outside judgment about our competence and worthiness, that's really limiting us and holding us back to the first thing we talked about?
I think I think there's complexities. It's like a kaleidoscope. We know thyself. There's a reason Socrates wrote that on the Temple of Delphi, and there's a reason that any great leader or anyone who's done magnificent things in the world knows themselves. So some of it is that self piece. What's my relationship with confidence, and what I feel I need and what I feel I'm lacking, and how does that either disable progress or enable progress. The other one is, that context of others. What does this mean for others in my life? What does this mean for the people I lead? What does this mean for the people dear to me? How do we have those conversations, and how do we mentor and support, from whether it's a formal mentoring or peer situation? And then there's, what does it mean for an organization? I mean, look at any sort of inquiry that happens on an organization. I think you'll see a lot of inflated confidence and decisions that have been made there. So it's not one thing. I think the first thing to do is, what is your relationship with confidence and the feeling that's something that is needed? It can be something that can be enjoyed, but I think the danger is the narrative over the past, couple of decades is that's what women need. And I think that's the piece. We don't say men need more confidence to step into something. We do say women need more confidence. So there's a global collective. I think it's the misguided holy grail of our times.
Well, on that differentiation from a gender perspective, you had shared with me when we talked previously, and something that I hadn't known
Mhm.
was that the projected amount of time it's going to take to have pay equality and parity really occur is going to be anywhere from 70 to 200 years before that happens. Is that right?
It's frightening, isn't it? It really does depend on the research you read, but that's the guide. So in 2019, the World Economic Forum published the Global Gender Report 2020, and they stated that none of us will see gender parity in our lifetimes, and nor likely will many of our children or their children. That's a really sobering finding of that report. So they're saying it will not be attained for 99.5 years. So that was one of their reports. Here in Australia, the gender pay gap is 20%. So in data released in November of this year found that men earned 20% more than women in 2019 and 2020. So that's equates to about 25,500 a year, which is down zero point 0.7 percentage points over the last year. And that then brings us to gender equity is going backwards during COVID and during the pandemic, when women are being impacted more. And I was having a conversation with someone I'm partnering with, Lee Gassner, recently, and he said actually what's really happening is the global events have just exposed the fault lines of gender inequity. So it has to change. And this is why our focus on fixing women and the narrative around confidence is all about fixing women. We have to fix our systems while we support our women and while we actually help men understand the dangers of a patriarchal upbringing, what that does to keep gender equity out of our reach and how it's harming men. So it's just a big, we'd have to have there's a lot of conversations here and a lot of change that needs to happen.
Sure.
It's certainly systemic change that is lacking right now.
Well, I don't know if everyone, I mean, that's maybe the reason why the gender inequity is continuing to exist for a ridiculous amount of time. How does the patriarchal society, can you talk more about how that impacts not only women, but men as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as a man, John, think about the beliefs that that you feel that you have to live with or live towards or be. You talked earlier on about there's who we are being while we do what we're doing in the world. And often from a coaching perspective, it's, here's what we do in the world, all really important stuff. Here's who we're being in the world. When those two things intersect, that's when that alignment and magic happens, things change. So I don't know what the situations, I think you're a little bit ahead of us than in Australia with regards to parental leave and, men actually taking parental leave. I know the Nordic countries are leaving us all way behind. Men still here believe that taking parental leave is a career limiting move, and that's patriarchy in action.
Okay, so to
when the
take care
sun
of the
sets,
family, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
So,
no,
so
go
take
on.
care of the family means that I'm weak, or what does that mean?
It could mean all of that, or I'm not the provider, or it opens up a whole raft of belief systems of who you feel you need to be and how you need to show up in the world. And then, privilege is invisible to those who have it. It's a phrase that we all know. So there are privileges of being a man in the world that women don't experience. We're constantly having to push and fight on those so-called ceilings. It's exhausting. It's to resolve this, we need to resolve it together. And there's a gap in the understanding of men collectively because they haven't done the work, they haven't done the exploration, or they just haven't thought about it. Here in Australia, when the sun sets tonight in Melbourne, in Australia, 8 men would have taken their lives to suicide. And World Health Organization did a report in 2018 that shows a direct correlation between gender inequity and men's mental health. So the cost to men of patriarchal beliefs, habits, ways of showing up in the world are harming men as much as they are harming men. And then there's that sort of middle road where I was having a conversation with a leader who's someone I actually know. His daughters asked me if they could interview me on some gender issues for a school assignment a couple of years ago. Now, at the end of that interview, just when they had line of sight, it was summer, they had line of sight on the swimming pool. They thought, we're out of here. One of the two twin girls, one of the girls got up and said, you know what, my dad said we just can't afford to pay women more right now. Now, he's a leader in an organization that has women reporting into him. That's an example of just, those conversations are still happening. That belief still exists. Love to pay women more right now. What? How is that even in conversation? So that's and then a financial justification of why it wasn't possible. We've had some conversations since.
That's great.
You'll have to rein me in. I could keep talking about this.
Well, you've said before, we need good men to be great men.
Yes.
What does that look like?
So Gunther Swoboda, who's the author of Good Men Great, talks about the devastating impact of patriarchy on men and what's required to shift from being a good man to choosing to be a great man. He's got a TED talk, actually. He's a good person for me to introduce you to, and we'll talk about that after this interview. So it's actually recognizing the privilege that you have as a man, and how you can be a better ally, and how you can support gender equity in a real meaningful way. So that's some great expertise and work that Gunther has, and we're partnering up on some work next year with regards to this. Because at the moment, what's missing is how uncovering the deep impact of patriarchy on men and women and on the system, and how we can start to bring that awareness about, and then bring men and women together to actually solve this problem, so that it's not 200 years or 99.5 as the World Health Organization report shared.
You have said before also that, there's a tendency in our society to study the unicorns, the extraordinary leaders like Steve Jobs, Arianna Huffington, Bill and Melinda Gates. Yet you also caution people against doing that. What's wrong with studying the iconic leaders that we all know and look up to?
Oh, absolutely. And all extraordinary, accomplished leaders, and, who have done remarkable things in the world. It's not that study, it's again, the beliefs that we have around that. So we love mythical creatures, yeah? And who doesn't love a unicorn? It's part of our growing up, the magical unicorn, from fairy tales to the unicorn businesses. I think the problem happens is when we elevate them as idols, and we buy into the instant success stories that are never instant. So elevating our idols I don't think that's helpful for us, and I don't think it's helpful for them. So there's no magic formula. There's just a lot of grit. They all worked really hard and have achieved remarkable things in their lives. And obviously many, like Arianna Huffington and Bill Gates, etc., still achieving remarkable things. The danger is that we look at that as a society and we go, overnight success, bang, they're brilliant, we can't touch them because that's them over there. And it somehow helps us to feed the narrative of diminishing our own potential. That's the problem. When I sold my company my 50% shareholding of my company in 2000, all of a sudden people were wanting to interview me about it was such an instant success. No, it was a 10-year slog. There's nothing instant about it. I believe that's what's damaging.
So idolizing, putting it out of reach, rather than focusing on the skills and the endurance and the resilience that's involved, and the courage that you've had and that many people have been successful have. What are some of the skills that you think would help people on that journey to focus on, that they can start doing now to create more success in their lives and the people that they serve?
Absolutely. Go back to know yourself. Develop your emotional intelligence, your EQ, and that is life's work, but it's the fundamental foundation of our lives. And when built really strongly, it's like those deep roots of a tree that no matter what passes, whether it's a light breeze or a cyclone, you can endure. You might get battered a little bit, but you won't lose who you are, and you'll know what you stand for, and what your purpose is in life, and what you care for deeply enough to make a difference in the world. What gets you out of bed. Mentoring, coaching skills, and as leaders, and as a leader, rather, obviously I'm a trained coach, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made was to invest 4 years of my life in this training. However, as a leader, develop good coaching, mentoring skills as a leader, and know when to move between, that coach mentor stance, or when needed, being more directive. I think Situational Leadership by Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard is still a really good, really, really great book. What was it? The 1 Minute Manager, and Leadership in the 1 Minute Manager. So just, get yourself some good resources, and absolutely, read up on all of the great leaders that you've mentioned, but know that it wasn't magic. They got up every day, even when they didn't feel like it. What did Madonna say? Pedestals are for statues, not people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the idolization of that is the issue, not what the people themselves have achieved.
As a coach, as a leader, it in large part comes down to conversations with self. That's the know thyself part, and also conversations with others. Would you mind sharing, is there any specific, conversation that you've had either with yourself or with other people that has had a significant impact on you, either personally or professionally?
Wow, so many. At 57, there's a lot. Let me think. That's a really good question. I love that question. I think probably one of the most pivotal conversations goes back to when I was 7. And my heritage is Croatian. My father left Croatia in the late 50s and escaped his country. There was, political turmoil there at the time, and he left and ended up in Australia a year or so later. And he wasn't allowed to go back to Croatia for a long time. And then in the 70s, when I was 7, he was allowed to go back. And I remember that it was very tense because he was very nervous, and there was a lot of fear there. So it's a time that is visceral for me. It's a real powerful memory, both in my bones, as it were, and also sort of from a memory point of view. And Mum and Dad gave me some money to go buy some sweets. So myself and my cousins, we all trotted down to the local shop, and I bought, king of the kids, I bought a bunch of sweets for everybody. And I didn't understand the currency at the time, and the currency was a bit unstable. And I gave them some money, and I felt like I got a truckload of change. And I went, oh my God, wow, I've got some more money. Let's who wants more sweets? And my cousin Yasna, who is a year older than me, just looked at me with a mixture of confusion, dismay, judgment probably, but the energy of the way she looked at me created a stillness. And then she just said, why would you buy more sweets when you could buy food and take it home to the family? And it really jolted me, because it was probably many years before I really understood the depth of it, but it jolted me to my core, because it was the first time I understood privilege. It was the first time that I understood what it means to have it, and to glimpse what it means not to have it. And I never lost the understanding that when we went to visit them, it created financial burden. And then I understood that my father always made sure, my mother always made sure that we didn't leave that financial burden footprint on their lives. If anything, changed that. So that really shaped me as I grew up, and it's definitely a deep memory that I'm deeply grateful for.
Yeah. That's a amazing story, and one that I can imagine echoes through what you do as an example of service and the value of being aware of your impact on the people around you and the people that are supporting you, and being a support for them, not just a burden. Thank you so much, Pollyanna, for sharing that story as well as all of your insights. What's the best way for people to stay in touch with you and get connected with you and your message and your organization?
Oh, thank you. Probably just going to my website, which is pollyannalenkic.com, and I've got a ton of resources on there that people can, avail and use. And there's some other online videos and leadership content that they can jump onto as well. So, yeah, I think just have a wonderful end of your year. And we were saying earlier on, we've shut down here now for the holiday season. So wishing you all well, but jump onto my website. All the contact details are on there, and reach out. It would be an absolute pleasure to connect. My Women in Success, my book, is available on Amazon, so please feel free to jump on there as well if that is something that speaks to you.
I'll put all links in the show notes on that one. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you, and stay well and be safe.
And same to you. And for those that are watching and listening, thanks so much for being here. And until next time, develop yourself, empower others, and lead by example.